What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Canadian Football Fanatics YouTube channel, and thank you guys for tuning in to another video. Blake and I back at it to talk some BC Lions. I know it's been a little while, folks. It's actually been it seemed a little bit longer than it has been, Blake. It's only been about 2 weeks since we've last uploaded, but I think we recorded probably closer to about 3-4 weeks ago. So it has been a while. There's some moves to be talked about, some depth charts to be talked about as well, Blake. But first, how you doing, buddy?
I'm good. I'm good. Yeah, Shane and I went over the free agency on day number one there, so that was good. And then yeah, it's been busy with hockey stuff and playoffs and stuff like that. But as always, still keeping my eye on the CFL.
The off-season grind, we shall call it. But like you said, you and Shane were lucky enough. Of course, I cut my fingers that day, so I wasn't able to join you guys. But you and Shane hopped on the channel and chatted about free agency, and it was a good conversation. Going back to listen to it, I had a lot of time on my hands, not going to work, and um, you know, free agency was such a tricky one because obviously, as we're well aware, with the tampering window opening up, free agency kind of is very underwhelming when it gets to officially opening because we've already almost seen or heard all the signings that have already happened. So um, it is kind of cool. Or the interesting part of free agency is that there is a few signings that go unheard of, and then come free agency day, we kind of hear about them and are a little bit surprised. And of course, we were surprised by a few of them as well, right? With Jeremiah Masoli, Deontay Williams, a couple other guys, Micah Alway that were signed the day of free agency that were kind of not talked about until official on I believe it was February 14th or 5th, some after Valentine's Day, if I remember correctly. But Blake, as you can see, buddy, we're kind of changing things around here. We got a graphic, we got sponsors and stuff like that. So want to start a few new segments, and hopefully we can bring in a few sponsorships to maybe work with us and partner with us for these segments. So like I was sending you kind of the outline of the show today, I want to start with a new segment. We're going to call it the 40-second play clock. Like, okay, and um,
Okay.
we did a little bit of this when we were coast to coast gridiron before we rebranded. And basically, what we're going to do, Blake, we're going to rotate. So this week, I'm going to be asking you the questions, and then next week, I'm gonna need you to do your homework and ask me the questions. But how we're going to do this? I'm going to give you 40 seconds, Blake, and I'm going to give you as many BC Lions trivia questions as you can answer in those 40 seconds. And we're going to see how many you can get. And then obviously, we're going to have a competition. I'll see if I can either beat you next week or if I can, tie you or whatever. And we are going to do that for the rest of the year. And hopefully, maybe somebody, a business or company, was maybe willing to sponsor the segment, and we can kind of read an ad read for them every time we do the 40-second play clock here for the BC Lions this year. So, Blake, I'm going to go first and ask you some of these questions, buddy. I said I prepared you a little bit, but we're going to put you on the spot. So I know it's going to be difficult, but we're going to have to. I know your BC Lions knowledge is there. So, for anybody that is tuning in on the chat that does want to maybe follow along or play along, feel free to comment down below the answers that maybe you feel like you know, Blake. So, like I said, buddy, we're going to put you on the spot here. No pressure for the first time. But are you ready to go?
Yeah, I'm ready. Let's do it.
I will give you one hint, Blake. If you watched First and Now this week, one question is from this past week's episode. So I will leave you with that, and we will begin the 40-second play clock. Let me get a play clock up here, though, so we have the right time, Blake. But all right, Blake, you ready, buddy?
I'm ready.
Okay. This is a tough one, Blake. So, okay, actually, we're gonna go actually opposite. This is what we're gonna do. Yeah. All right, Blake. First question for you: who has the most points in BC Lions franchise history?
The most points? Well, that would be a kicker, so that's sweet Louis Paglia.
1 for 1. All right, Blake. Here's the question from First and Now for your little hint. All right, I need the top three longest tenured BC Lions. So, who has been on the BC Lions the longest? The top three guys.
Top three guys right now. Andrew Pearson is probably one.
Okay, he's number two.
Oh man, this is tough. Uh, Hatch, is he one of them?
He is not. Incorrect. I will give you a hint. He's a defensive back.
Defensive back. Oh, well, ooh. It would have been TJ, but he just retired, did he not?
I don't know if it's official, but who maybe is his other uh, wingmate or line mate, I guess, if you
Oh
will.
gosh. Why am I drawing a blank? I don't
Because we're
know.
putting because we're putting you on the spot, which is good though. This is why I wanted to do this. But it's Gary Peters is number one.
Oh man, of course it would be Gary.
And number three is a tough one, a very tricky one that I wouldn't have got either. Isaiah Messam, number three, longest
Wow.
tenured BC Lion. Obviously, that question, Blake, is because a lot of our leaders have kind of left in the offseason, and obviously
Mm-hmm.
there's some new faces within the room. So, Blake, question number three: who has the most special teams tackles of all time for the BC Lions?
Most special teams tackles.
I'll give you a hint. He played a long time for the BC Lions and probably around the time where we were in high school and he was, I believe, on the 2011 Grey Cup team. I'll say that.
The 2011 Grey Cup team. Special teams.
You're gonna kick yourself when I tell you this. I know that.
Yeah, I know I am. I have no idea again.
It is Jason Araki.
Really?
Yes,
Very,
Jason
very
Araki.
okay.
Gotta remember him. I loved him growing up. But anyways, this one will tie in, Blake, to maybe a Lion that is coming back to the team this year. I'll give you that hint, okay? So who is the last BC Lion to record 4 total touchdowns in a football game that's not a quarterback? So a running back or a receiver.
Well, you kind of gave this away because you said he's coming back to the team. It's James Butler.
So we got 2. We'll go 2 for 4 right now, Blake. We'll give you 2 more questions because 40 seconds have definitely gone, but next one, Blake. This one has some ties to maybe a somebody that we like to root for, I guess I will say, and has some ties to his family. So, who has the most total touchdowns? So that's rushing and receiving by a BC Lions player in a season. So not a quarterback. Who has the most total touchdowns? That would be receiving and rushing. He has. I don't want to give my hint's going to give it away. Um, he played in the 90s and has a nickname. And like I said, you have a connection with his family.
I have a. Is it Corey? It's not Corey, is it?
It's Corey
Yeah.
Philpott.
Okay.
I'm going to give you half a point for that because I gave you too good of a hint. So we're going 2.5 out of 5. So last one, Blake. This one's a tricky one. The last road playoff victory for the BC Lions is when?
The last playoff road victory. Well, I know that in 2022 and 2023, they won at home. They also won at home in 2011, both the West Final and the Grey Cup. Is it in the last 10 years?
It is not.
Not in the last 10 years. I believe it's Hamilton. Wasn't it an East crossover game?
What can you give me a year?
2009?
Oh, Blake, we're gonna bump your total up, buddy, because you got that one because that was the hardest one. We're
Yeah.
gonna give you 1, 2, 3. We're gonna give you 4 out of 6, Blake, for week number 1.
Not
Okay, buddy?
bad.
Not bad at all, to be honest. So, Blake, two-part question to throw it back to you, buddy. First of all, did you enjoy that? We're going to call it the
Yeah.
40-second play clock. And number two, I'm going to need you to bring the heat next week because you're going to be asking me the questions, and we're going to see if I can get more than you with 4 out of 6. But you can ask me whatever, 7 or 8, however many questions you want to write down, and you can kind of get in that 40 seconds. We probably went a little bit over, which is all good, but if you have about 4 or 5, 6 questions, Blake, that'll kind of be in the ballpark for us. And we're going to do that every time we do a show. I'm not too sure if we're going to be able to do that every week when we have a post game and preview and stuff like that. But leading up to the season, we're definitely going to try to do that every show, Blake. So you got 4 out of 6 the first time, and I go first next week to see if I can top that. So, Blake, you enjoy that little 40-second play clock, buddy? You got
Yeah, that was
any
fun.
You got any trivia questions in mind?
Not yet, but I'm sure I can think of some.
Yes, I would just a quick Google as well as I have maybe a little bit of upper hand, Blake, but I don't know if I showed you. They give you like these little things in the press box that have like basically the last time a BC Lion did this or last time a BC Lion scored 4 touchdowns. So like I kind of opened that thing up and I was just like, I'm gonna take a few cool things that I found, and that was kind of my cheat sheet. But like I said, buddy, any 4 or 5 questions that kind of are BC Lions trivia, they don't even have to be with stats. They could be, the last time the BC Lions have played in wherever, Nova Scotia or whatever. Um, whatever kind of comes to your mind and you think that you can trip me up on, Blake. So let's get into the show a little bit now, folks. And if you guys enjoyed that, like I said, please comment down below. Let us know that you guys did enjoy it. Let us know maybe that we took longer to answer the questions. You guys answered them faster. Whatever you want, feel free to comment down below. Of course, like, comment, and most importantly, subscribe. Blake, smash the subscribe button. But Blake, it's been, like I said, about 2 weeks since we have talked some BC Lions here on the channel, and for the most part, we have chatted about almost all the transactions here. Like I said, the free agency period is a weird one because you kind of usually hear the rumblings of some of these stuffs happening. But there is some guys that we didn't talk about last time. I'm just going to name them, Blake, and then feel free to just maybe talk about 1 or 2 of them, and then I'll talk about maybe the other 2 that you didn't chat about. But starting with the BC Lions signed middle linebacker Mike Alway, quarterback Jeremiah Masoli, defensive back Deontay Williams from the Saskatchewan Roughriders, David Foucault, and Adam Konar, a linebacker. Blake, before I go, I guess I will turn it back over to you, buddy. Who's just maybe a name that jumps out to you from these 4 or 5 guys that maybe you like to see in a BC Lions jersey?
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised. Um, well, surprised on one, not surprised on the other. I kind of expected it to happen. Position that we're about to talk about, but I was surprised to see Mike Alway reunited with the Lions. He was, of course, here time with the Calgary Bears, and then went to Calgary. Dealt with a little bit of controversy. He's a player that likes to play on the line, crosses that line. He's been suspended a few times in his career, but I think he's a really good defender. And as we saw in harness, that can play on the line is a very effective player. The other name that I wasn't necessarily surprised about, but I am happy that the Lions signed them with the kind of lack of experience of their backup quarterback position, was Jeremiah Masoli. He's a veteran who proved last year that as long as he can stay healthy, he is still a serviceable backup. And of course, we know that with VA, of course, often like that. If and by chance, we obviously hope this doesn't happen, but if it goes down to injury, we know that we have a more serviceable backup who can do the job for the BC Lions.
Yeah, buddy, that actually works perfect because you talked about 2 guys, and I'm going to talk about 2 new guys. I too was a little bit kind of surprised with the Micah Always signing. We already have, Ben Hladek in house, and Josh Woods coming back off of torn ACL, and going to be curious to see how that plays out, and maybe stick around, folks. I definitely have a hot take within that subject, but Blake, you didn't mention 2 other guys that I want to talk about, which is perfect. So I'm going to talk about Deontay Williams, a defensive back coming over from the Saskatchewan Roughriders, and for those that aren't aware, he spent most of the time last year playing the boundary cornerback position. So kind of what Gary Peters plays, the short side of the field um, in the boundary there. And I don't think he's coming over to take over that job. So my kind of intrigue with this signing is that I'm curious if he's going to be maybe playing the other side of the field, the field side corner. But then you look at a guy like Jalen Edwards Cooper coming back, Jordan Perryman already coming back on the roster. So maybe this is a depth option for the BC Lions with a guy like Deontay Williams coming back into the fold with starting experience in that Saskatchewan Roughriders defense last year. I remind folks that he played alongside the same side of the field as Roland Milligan and kind of was in tandem with Roland Milligan last year for a majority of games. So a nice depth signing. I'm curious to see if maybe he's going to be able to fit in somewhere on the defense with, like I mentioned, Jordan Perryman, Jalen Edwards Cooper probably being the opposite of Gary Peters. Gary Peters on the boundary side, and then you look at in the slot probably a guy like Ronald Kent taking one of the starting positions, whether it be in the boundary or the field. and then that kind of really leaves only one spot open in the secondary at that boundary halfback position. So I'm curious if Deontay has some experience inside in the slot at all, or if he's going to maybe just be a depth option, which is a really good depth option at that one. And then another one is kind of a depth option, potential starter as well, as David Foucault coming over from the Edmonton Elks. I believe he's up there getting, mid 30s. Which is always a concern in pro football with, we're seeing younger guys coming in year after year and being contributors. But a guy that was a contributor for the Edmonton Elks last season, started a number of games for them, and um, was a very serviceable starter. And I think he could be a very serviceable starter for the BC Lions. And at worst, he's a depth option for the BC Lions as that kind of sixth, seventh offensive lineman. Obviously, we have Andrew Pearson coming back, so he's going to probably reserve that role for himself. But just having the option there and kind of, I think it's kind of like a backup plan. I don't want to say backup plan because that kind of sounds a little bit bad, but in case, maybe George Una or Chris Slugger doesn't work out in the interior offensive line, you have a guy like David Foucault who started games in this league, and you can kind of rely on him to be that option. So, Blake, the only guy that we didn't talk about is Adam Konar, I believe another former BC line, if I'm not mistaken, or definitely a veteran in the CFL. So, um, Blake, where I kind of wanted to transition this conversation is, buddy, is I've been busy over the last few days, kind of making some graphics for us. So we're going to go over and take a look at my projected BC Lions depth chart. And folks, just for a asterisk, a reminder in there, this is by no means an official depth chart by the BC Lions, especially with new guys coming over and not having familiarity with them. Tried to kind of use the BC Lions previous depth charts from last season to kind of slot guys in where they previously played, and then guys coming in from opposite teams. I tried to, as far back as I could, go back to previous depth charts from teams and see where they were playing with teams from the past year, past years, and put them in a familiar position. Now, some of these guys are first time players in the CFL, so they've had no experience. So I've kind of just slotted them in anywhere. So like I said, this is by no means Yes, this is by no means an official depth chart. This is going to look a little different come training camp and when the BC Lions put things out. But this is kind of a rough idea of what we're going to start, Blake, with the BC Lions offense. And we're going to go like this. Blake, what do you think of the graphic, buddy? What, do you like it or
That
what?
looks good. Yeah.
Yeah, love it, buddy. Okay, so like I said, we're going to start with the BC Lions offense. So for those that are looking at the graphic or on YouTube right now, we have our Canadians marked out with our little Canadian icon as well. Something that I'm kind of forgetting about right now is I definitely forgot to implicate who are our global players, but I can kind of go through that while we're going through the depth chart right now. Um, but like I said, the initial starting 12 players and then some of the depth guys, you kind of have an idea of where they're going to sit. And some of these other guys, especially the receivers and slot backs on the boundary side of the field and kind of where Stanley Berryhill and Keon Hatcher are right now, Blake. Some of those guys are a lot of first-time guys in the CFL and really not really sure where they're going to play. Some of these guys, like a Devin Carter could be playing a wide receiver, backing up Stanley Berryhill and not being in the slot. So this could definitely change come training camp, like I said, and could change by the time Blake and I do this next video because I could do some editing and some shaking and moving with the roster. So Blake, I guess we can start at the offensive line and work our way back is what we will do. So, like I said, folks, this is a very just rough projected depth chart. This is not official. This is just to get an idea of where guys might sit on the BC Lions this upcoming year. So, what I have right now for the BC Lions upcoming starting offensive line is I have Jarrell Broxton at left tackle, Chris Slugger at left guard, Mike Couture at center, Andrew Pearson starting at right guard, and Dejon Allen at right tackle. Um, where I think this is going to get interesting, Blake, and the question that probably we're going to throw back to you, Blake, is I think the BC Lions are probably set at that offensive tackle position, right? Dejon Allen he's a
Yep.
starting right tackle for the BC Lions. We just traded for him. Jarrell Broxton previously started at left tackle. Those guys are probably cemented in at starting at the both tackles positions. And obviously, Michael Couture, we talked about him last show. He re-signed with the team. We were both kind of wondering if maybe they were going to go a different direction. Maybe look at a guy like Tyler Packer, who's slated to back him up right now, but they're going to likely go with Michael Couture starting at center once again. So you have three guys that are pretty much cemented in stone as starters on the offensive line. Now, obviously, Michael Couture could probably get maybe pushed a little bit by Tyler Packer if he was to have a good camp, but I think Michael Couture is probably as close to a lock at starting than he was in previous years. Now, where you look at some of the competition, Blake, is I think at right guard and left guard, and by no means is this in pen. I would say this is very much in pencil right now, and you could erase all four of those guys that are in there right now, except for I'm not even going to try to pronounce that guy's name because I don't want to butcher it, but Galdana, we're going to call him. That was the last name, the third right guard there. Um,
Xavier Gadlin, I believe.
you better than me, Blake. So, excluding him, but no offense to him because he could very well come into training camp and prove himself very quickly. But you look at left guard, we have Chris Slugger, David Foucault, and then you look at right guard, you have Andrew Pearson, George Una. Now, where things are going to get interesting, I have Andrew Pearson started in here um, ahead of George Una. Now, obviously, that could change, and Andrew Pearson showed his worth last year being that extra offensive lineman. There was rumblings. I believe the guys at Three Down Nation had the conversation of David Foucault probably starting at right guard. I went back and looked at the Edmonton Alex depth chart from last year, and he started a majority of games or backed up at left guard. So that's personally why I have him there right now. And um, Chris Slugger, I'm very high on Chris Slugger, and I think you are as well, Blake, at hopefully him being a very good piece for us to start next year. I'm curious for you, Blake, maybe this combination of offensive linemen in the interior there. Do you like the starters that are Chris Slugger and Andrew Pearson? I know you're a big fan of Andrew Pearson and have a relationship with him as well, but maybe just to flip it over to you, would you like to see maybe Una get a run at that right guard position and maybe even Foucault start at left guard just with the veteran experience that he brings, or just talk about that conversation with just the offensive line, Blake?
Yeah, no, I think Andrew went over in the trivia segment, kind of. He is one of the top three longest tenured BC Lions, and he really never had a starter's opportunity. He's been always kind of, even early in his career, he wasn't even really the sixth or seventh offensive lineman. He was more like the eighth and ninth depth chart guy, was on this roster. And then last year and the year before, he got that sixth and seventh look, started a couple of games, but has never really had an opportunity to have a full season as the starter. Well, I would really like to see him get an opportunity as the starter. And I really, Chris Slugger, he kind of bided his time, waited, never really got that starter's opportunity last year. So I think that would be a very hefty guard battle between David Wu and Chris Slugger. Uh, it would come down to who performs better in training camp and the preseason games.
Yeah, for sure. It's going to be an interesting one. And as you said, it's going to come down to who performs better in training camp and preseason games. So it's kind of a hard one to have this conversation now without the boys aren't going to be on the field for another 2 months time. I know we're into March and it's like, oh man, March, April, May, and then we're almost there. But we still have a few more months before these guys get on the field and before we hear, who was showing out at right guard at training camp and who was, playing well at left guard and stuff like that. And we'll get those reports, I'm sure, once they get up to Kamloops and whatnot. But Blake, we're going to go back now and kind of put a bow on the offensive line conversation. Let's talk about our wide receivers that are going to be lining up for the BC Lions this year. And I think there's probably a lot of question marks around this, right? And one that maybe we can save for the end of the show, or even you can tie it in here is, you look at this receiving core, and as of now, it looks like it's going to be from left to right. It's going to be Stanley Berryhill at the boundary receiver position, Keon Hatcher at the boundary slot back position, and then Javon Katoy in the field slot back. Justin McInnis at his usual field slot back position, and then Aiden Eberhardt out wide. And you look at the right side of the screen, Blake, and Aiden Eberhardt, Justin McInnis, Javon Couture, I personally don't mind that at all, and I really like those three receivers. But you look to the left side of the field, and Stanley Berryhill, I think, had some ups and downs last year, but had a solid season. It wasn't a bad season by any means, and I think there could be some development there, but still an unproven player at that position. And you look at Keon Hatcher, who, the situation that he went in, and I know Bakes kind of wanted to, people wanted to make it he got released, and I think he did get straight up released because they would kind of put out that he was trying to um, see what his services would command elsewhere. But Baker was kind of like that was not really even official that he was cut yet, but it was because he signed a new contract, so that technically was official. Um, Keon Hatcher still has. I think you and I are probably hopeful for that he can maybe get back to the level that he was playing in 2023 and 2022, but it's not a guarantee with his age and coming off the torn Achilles previously. That's us just hoping and projecting that he's going to get back to that level. So I think when you look at the right side of the screen, Blake, have some confidence there and have some faith in some of those guys that they're going to be able to get it done. Especially the Canadian positions. You see a lot of Canadian flags or Canadian maple leafs, whatever you want to call it, there on the right side of the screen. But we look left and a lot of Americans and guys that are going to be first-time CFLers. So I'm curious where your confidence lays within the receiving core, Blake. And what I'm going to kind of leave it to you and give it to you to answer is there is a guy that is still currently available that we just recently released. And I'm curious, the longer he waits, would there be a possibility of reuniting Alex Hollins back with the BC Lions? Because obviously the contract is what it is, but being released, just like Keon Hatcher, I believe Keon Hatcher is like 100K a year type player now with the contract that he was receiving after being released from the Lions. I believe it was up around 185K or something like that before he got re-released, reworked that deal. Alex Hollins now has been, I think, free agent for about 2 or 3 weeks. Maybe he waits for a training camp injury or something like that, or a spot to kind of become more noticeable around the CFL. But I look at the BC Lions and think like, man, like obviously it's no guarantee, but that Stanley Berryhill position is primed and waiting for a guy like Alex Hollins to kind of come back into the offense, and I would imagine has a very big chip on his shoulder. He just got cut. The Lions themselves are kind of telling him like you're not the player that he was. He can have the opportunity to come back in and be like, man, you guys were wrong, and I'm going to show you and everybody else that I still have a lot of game left and I can still play at that level. Blake, what is your kind of confidence level or maybe concern in the BC Lions receiving core as it lays right now? Obviously, we're gonna maybe get an addition later in the year. We talked about a guy like obviously it didn't work out for us last year, but a guy like Travis Fulgham, who we were all high on, and a first-time CFL guy, maybe a guy like MJ Wright or Hayden Hatton, one of these guys that we don't know now. Maybe we know come, July and August and stuff like that, they're making an impact on the field. But what's your confidence level, or maybe what's your concern in kind of our receiving core as it lays right now?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, Cole, like that right side of the line, or the right side of the field, if you will, I'm pretty confident in that, especially the two names at the bottom, Justin McInnes and Javon Katoy, and even a little bit further, our draft pick from last season, or at least one of them, Ezekiel Tiede, we're now projected to be Javon Katoy's backup, and Braden Lennius, who's been a very serviceable receiver in Saskatchewan for quite a while. He was, of course, now signed in BC. Aiden Eberhard as well. He showed really well last year as kind of the fourth or fifth option for the BC Lions. Pretty much anything that was thrown his way, he was catching last season. So that was really well. Um, that left side, Stanley Berryhill, I agree that the verdict is still out on him, and we will see what happens with Stanley Berryhill. Hatch, I'm really not concerned about. I know what happened last year, but he had to fight his way back from the torn ACL in the West Final in 2023, and it looked like he just really never got set, and that was the problem with Hatch. He just couldn't get his feet under him. I would lump Hatch kind of in the same boat, if you will, as our quarterback Nathan Rourke and our defensive lineman Matthew Betts, where if you give him a full off season, a full training camp to get healthy, get acclimated, get ready to go, they are going to come back to as close as to their all-star forms as they were before their injuries or they left the NFL.
Yeah, very well said, Blake. I like that answer. And a guy I know you're familiar with, Jared Bernhardt, I believe, a kind of an athlete, a guy that got some experience in the NFL, but is an athlete, a lacrosse player, I believe, a professional lacrosse player trying to make the transition into football. And he could be a guy that, you never know. He's a big time athlete, and maybe he makes the transition very cleanly into the CFL game. So, like I said, you look at Stanley Berryhill up top there, and you look at Keon Hatcher. Outside of that, the left side guys are very unproven, but also could be a guy that we. I believe that last guy actually, Blake, is Ed Lee. We actually saw him at training camp last year, and was the guy that was making some plays, right? I remember we talked about him a little bit, and you never can tell when these guys might get the opportunity to step up and back up their reputation as good some of these good players. So, like I said, folks, keep an eye on guys like MJ Wright, Jalen Sample, um, Giovanni Lofton. Hopefully, I'm saying that right. Ed Lee, Hayden Hatton. I'm not even going to try say Stacy's Chickawamsey, Chickawamsey, and Devin Carter. A few guys that could be unknown guys now, but could be household names come mid-season, right? We see this all the time in the CFL of guys coming in the CFL making impacts right away as first-year CFL players, and kind of why we went in the direction of a guy like Ryan Rigmain, right, who's kind of cut his teeth with the U.S. scouting, right? We have a guy on staff like a Neil McAvoy. I forget who's the head of Canadian scouting right now off the top of my head, but a guy like Ryan Rigmain, who has found multiple Kenny Lawlers and all the guys on Winnipeg, all the guys with BC Keon Hatchers and stuff like that. This is the time where he has to kind of find some of these guys that are some you know underrated, off the radar. Probably some of these guys. He's gonna have to make some of these guys be some contributors for the BC Lions, because obviously we're happy right now. We got these 5 or 6 guys that with the starting five, and then you look at the depth options, right? Braden Lennis, you mentioned Ezekiel Tiede, but as we know, Blake, injuries happen throughout a CFL season. Some of these guys are going to be called upon to step up and be contributors for us, right? We saw a guy like Kieran Persson last year having to step up when Javon Katoy went down and stuff like that. So the depth options, although sometimes can be a little bit overblown or spent too much time on, they're very important throughout an 18-game regular season, and obviously we're hoping for a long playoff run, right? So who knows what some of these guys might be able to do in a training camp scene when the competition starts to get ratcheted up that much more. So Blake, we're going to have a little bit of a transition in this conversation because we actually didn't mention it. It's probably arguably the biggest news since we last had the conversation. I know we teased about it off air, I believe, but as you look at the fullback position, Blake, there's one big
Mhm.
hole that is there right now, and I think we should probably just take the time to congratulate David Mackey on one hell of a career, 6-year career in the CFL. All 6 of them went to BC Lions, former Western Mustang product, Vanier Cup champion, a phenomenal human being, football player. You can't really say enough good things about David Mackey as a person and as a player. We obviously saw and makes it probably even that much harder, to be honest, Blake, of arrow up this past season, and we're following his off season and learning about his family and stuff like that. And although it makes it harder to kind of you know let him walk away as if we're kind of letting him, but as it makes it harder to see him go, there is a little bit of a sense of happiness with the family he's going back home to with his wife, and the opportunity with the Western Mustangs program. And obviously we saw this past week, I believe, the news of he's going to be with the CFLPA, and I would imagine be a big face of big voice, excuse me, of the players, the current players. So just well wishes, best of luck to David Mackey and the rest of I guess we should say the next chapter of his life. But Blake, is there any just words for David? I know we're both big fans of David, and we're definitely gutted to see him go.
Yeah, no, it's definitely going to be a big loss for the BC Lions. David was, of course, our short yardage QB, if you want to call it that, last season, and he did really well at that. Other I don't think the Lions want Nathan Rourke taking those reps. He you just don't need the extra cost. But then again, like I don't know if you even want to ask Jeremiah Masoli to do that job either, with how injury prone he's been, unfortunately, in his CFL career. So I think that might go to a guy like Chase Bryce, the right now third string quarterback for the BC Lions, to ask to take those short yardage plays. But as far as David Mackey is concerned, just congratulations on a great career. I know that this is made with his family. This decision, I should say, was made with his family in mind. His wife, Joanne, of course, lives out in Ontario. I'm sure with them being fairly young, around the same age as you and I, actually, that they probably want to start a family here soon. So David Mackey, and as you said, Cole, like right away, he was snatched up as I believe it was the player player development or something like that. But
Something player something.
yeah, but he's very high up in the So that's not a surprise to see that the PA picked him up right away. He is still going to be involved in the game, but he's going to be allowed to do it from the comfort.
I will say one last thing to David, if he's listening by chance, but don't be a stranger. Remember that you always got a home on the West Coast. I'd imagine with his role with the CFLPA, we'll see him around and maybe see him at one or two games throughout the season. Obviously, it's close because he's in the country still, but he's also on the other side of the country. So I'm sure it's going to be a tough one. But I would imagine he's going to be a guy that wants to come out here and spend a weekend or something like that, maybe even a week and catch two games, two home games or something like that, and really connect with some of his old teammates. So Blake, with that question, kind of a transition into running back slash fullback. I would imagine as of now, Dylan St. Pierre will probably be the starter, but I would say, folks, do not forget about a guy like Riley Pickett. I believe that Lions officially have changed him back to a defensive lineman on the depth chart, but he will be a guy that's on the roster because he's going to probably, excuse me, Blake, be our long snapper. I believe
Yeah.
Kyle Nelson, I believe, wasn't brought back. So I would think Riley Pickett will continue his long snapping duties. I would keep an eye on Riley Pickett as maybe a potential if he can at least show the same level of play as a guy like Dylan St. Pierre, who's a natural fullback. He's played fullback his whole life. Well, Riley Pickett hasn't. He's still learning the position, and we actually got to see an arrow up with him and David Mackey kind of working together. And off the field, he was asking David to get on the field before pregame and kind of go through the fullback steps of what am I supposed to do in this play call or what am I going to do in this formation and stuff like that. And I just wouldn't count out a guy like Riley Pickett to push a guy like Dylan St. Pierre at that starting fullback position, Blake. But we're going to head back to the running back position. And obviously, JB is RB1. There's no freaking debate about that. He is our guy, and I'm really excited to watch him run the rock and even catch passes again. It's going to be a lot of fun out of the backfield. But you look at those guys afterwards, right? Xander Horvath, Jason Huntley, Quandre Olson, and little note for Quandre Olson. I'm sure Lions fans have heard this, but he was the guy that caught Nathan Rourke's viral touchdown pass when he was with the Jacksonville Jaguars in the NFL a few years ago. Devontae Price, Jordan Terrell. And one note, Blake, is Xander Horvath. I think the guys on First and Now, Bakes and Nick
Nick.
mentioned that Horvath could be a potential hybrid running back slash fullback kind of guy. So he could be another guy to keep an eye on of, maybe they go away from Dylan St. Pierre, Ryan Pickett, and Horvath is a guy that can be an impact player. So keep an eye on him. Blake, it's kind of a tough one because these are all five guys that we have really no experience with. But just kind of, I guess, how excited are you to see JB back in a BC Lions uniform? And even you can touch on any of those guys that are maybe going to back him up. It's just unfortunate that we've kind of seen the BC Lions over the past few years that we've only really dressed one running back, and so it'll be curious to see how that kind of flexibility within the roster plays with a guy like Buck Pierce being in charge now. Maybe he wants two or three running backs dressed every game day because you never know. And it's just going to be interesting. But what are your thoughts on the fullback slash running back, I guess, room, Blake?
Yeah, no, I see how that fullback room goes. It's not a position that's used very often. And then last year, of course, became the short yardage quarterback, was in the news. But the fullback, for the most part, is a blocking position. So Dylan St. Pierre and Riley Pickett will have to work on blocking and see how that goes. As far as the running backs are concerned, I'm really excited for James Butler to come back to BC. Of course, last year he was very vocal on how it went and how at the back half of the season when it seemed like he was constantly getting healthy scratched over and over and over, and even fans in Hamilton were quite befuddled by it. They couldn't believe it. They're like, this guy is one of the top running backs in the league, and we're healthy scratching him game in and game out. Whether it was a problem with the coaching staff, we'll never really know. And he's also a lot better catching back out of the backfield than William Stanback is. That's of course no disrespect to Stanback. He's very good at running the rock, but he's not as good at catching it out of the backfield. Nathan Rourke likes the offs a little bit more than V did, so I think that's going to help Nathan Rourke in the offense this season.
Yeah, for sure. So, Blake, that kind of puts a bow on the offense. Obviously, we talked about the quarterback position, and that'll be an interesting one to see basically who's going to be the short yards quarterback position. And other than that, Blake, that kind of wraps up the offensive conversation. Let's quickly remove this. Boom. Blake, how technical savvy are we getting? Hey, buddy, we got backgrounds, we got freaking depth charts we're pulling up. We're learning here, buddy. So this is the BC Lions. Like I said, folks, same thing as offense projected. This is nothing official. This is probably, I was gonna say nothing close, but this will be close to official, within the ballpark, anyways, and maybe a few guys changed here and there. But um, let's start, I guess, up front again. We started with offensive line. Let's start with the defensive line once again. And to be honest, Blake, I really like the interior defensive line. That's where I'm going to start. And you look at a guy like Christian Covington coming back into year two, and I think both you and I are very high on his potential in a year or two coming back, right? And you and I were, people can go and listen to the post game shows, and we're very critical of him, wanted more. And as frustrating as it was, it probably wasn't as realistic as we both thought of wanting to see him make an impact play. And it's like, the guy was transitioning in the CFL for the very first time, never playing it in high school, never playing it in Pop Warner football. So it took him a little bit of a transition period, and rightfully so. And he ended up, I believe, finishing top five or something like that in sacks. So hopefully there's another level for him to get there. And I think the addition of a guy like Matthew Betts is only going to make it easier on him to, you're only gonna be able to double team one of those guys. So one of those guys you got to be able to kind of rely on. You have to be able to eat on one-on-one opportunities, whether that's Matthew Betts. I would say good luck to any offensive tackles trying to be one-on-one with Matthew Betts. And if it's Christian Covington, good luck there, because I think he's like 6'3", 285 pounds. He's just a massive human being. You look behind him with a guy like Marcus Moore, a guy we just re-signed, and Nathan Cherry, a Canadian guy who's just unfortunate, very high on him, and just he's been plagued by injuries year after year. And it's an unfortunate thing. A University of Saskatchewan product was BC Lions, I want to say 2022 or 2021 first round pick, a highly talked about prospect coming out of U Sports, and just it's unfortunate that his career has kind of been hampered by injuries, torn ACL and surgeries and stuff like that. And you look at nose tackle. I'm curious to kind of see how things could change, because Christian Covington started a few games at nose tackle last year, and then they kind of, with the ratio rules and stuff like that, would put Josh Banks in there after a few snaps. And it'll be curious to see if Dwayne Hendricks lines up at nose tackle or not. And then you look at behind him, Thibaut Tobaye, contributor for us for the last 2 or 3 years, and a very good contributor. And then you look at a guy behind Thibaut Tobaye, Jonah Tavai, a guy that contributed for us last year as a starter during a few games. So you look at interior there, and you have probably six guys that can contribute meaningful snaps. So you look on the interior or the outside, the defensive end position, and that's probably a little bit more of a question mark. And you see a guy like Matthew Betts, right on, right? And a guy like Trey Crawford, some CFL experience, that's good. Look over to the left side, Sione Tam, I think he's there's some untapped potential that's still there. But then I remind folks that he is on the suspended list. I believe it was a 2-game suspension, maybe it was in a 6-game suspension for next season. So we're going to be without him for a period of time. Giuliano Felinaco, he was a guy that contributed for us last year, had a meaningful play, but he had a few meaningful plays, but they were probably outshined by the one that he had. I think it was a roughing the passer call that
Yeah.
that kind of a lot of fans were very unhappy with. But Blake, as I kind of throw it back to you, my concern would be more so with the depth and the yeah, I guess just the depth at the defensive end position. You look in the interior, Blake, we have some dogs there. Like I said, Christian Covington and some of those depths, and Dwayne Hendricks and some of the depth behind him. But what are your kind of concerns and question marks for the defensive line, Blake? And I'm going to leave you to kind of do this by myself, Blake, because I'm a dummy and I forgot my charger in the other room. So I'm going to go get my charger while you talk about the defensive line for the BC Lions.
I know I am excited about the defensive line. Sione Hema, as we said, was a contributor last year. Unfortunately, the Lions are going to be without him for the beginning of the season. I'm also intrigued by Giuliano Falanico, as he will most likely be the Lions starter until Sione Hema comes back. And as you said, Cole, like the nose tackle position is very interesting, because we have Dwayne Hendricks, who's probably going to start, but then you also have Thibaut Dabaye, Jonah Tavai, who played last season and played pretty well for the BC Lions. So I am excited about those two gentlemen potentially getting more playing time in the defensive tackle position. I'm not worried about them at all. I mean, Christian Covington, as we saw, got better and better as the season went on. Marcus Moore, Nathan Cherry, like all four of them have had playing time in the CFL in their career. Not worried about the defensive tackles at all. And defensive end, we already know what Matthew Betts can do. I don't think there's really much more that we need to say about Matthew Betts, to be completely honest.
Yeah, for sure. And you look at that defensive tackle position, Blake, as well. 3 out of the 4 of them with that little Canadian icon, and that's a good thing to see as well. If there ever is any sort of injury that happens throughout a season, we can kind of make sure that that doesn't hurt our ratio flexibility, right? You still have a guy like Nathan Cherry that can step up and kind of play those snaps, or a guy like Francis Bemi as well. But like I said, I'm kind of more so. I like the unit that we're putting together, especially if those 4 starters can get on the field for a lot of time, and um, I think those guys can wreck some havoc together. I'm more so curious as we mentioned about the receiver position. Injuries happen throughout a season, suspensions happen throughout a season. So guys like Juliano Felinaco, Trey Crawford, maybe even a Deshaun Stevens, Jeffrey Johnson, they're going to probably be looked upon to play some snaps for us early on in the season until Sione Tiama is able to come back after his suspension. So Blake, let's get into the linebacker position. And this is a very interesting one. And this is a one that probably is one that you would want to put in pencil and not in pen quite yet. And that would start with Patrice Rene starting at Sam linebacker. That is not something that the Lions have put out there. He was the backup he was the backup Sam last season, kind of transitioned into playing a little bit more safety, a little bit of halfback, and then TJ Lee came back and took over that Sam linebacking position. So Patrice Rene got some run at there, but wasn't ever a long-term starter at that position. You look at a guy like Adam Auclair, hasn't ever played the Sam linebacker position, so that could not be a guy that we see playing Sam. It could be a defensive back that maybe even gets put at Sam. Like I said, the Sam linebacker is a linebacker by title, but he is most definitely a coverage linebacker in a sense. That sign linebacker, he's going to more often than not be covering the third inside receiver on opposing teams. So if it was, the BC Lions first team defense going against the BC Lions first team offense, Patrice Rene would be more often than not covering a guy like Javon Katoy in that third inside slot position. So um, a guy that you want with some coverage ability as well as being able to come downhill and tackle because, like I said, he is a linebacker by trade, but he is more so a defensive back kind of by his duties and responsibilities in that defense. Now you look at middle linebacker, you look at Will linebacker, Blake. This is going to be a very, very interesting camp and conversation when it comes to who is going to be starting at that position. And you look at a guy like Josh Woods, starting linebacker from last year, was going to be our quarterback of the defense, tears his ACL in week 3 versus Edmonton, I want to say, at home. And Ben Hladic ends up playing the rest of the season at that middle linebacker position. Now, where things get interesting, Blake, because I think, okay, it looks pretty good. This is where we're going to go into the season with. We have our 3 linebackers, or at least 2 of the linebackers that are going to start that were our starters from last season. The Lions go out and sign Micah Alway, former starter for the BC Lions, a guy with multiple years experience in the CFL, a absolute wrecking ball as a middle linebacker. And Blake, before I turn it back to you, I have one flipping hot take that I'm going to leave with the people before we get out of here. And that hot take for the BC Lions, Blake, the CFL Draft is upcoming, probably about a month and a bit away. Actually, probably about 2 months away.
Yeah, it's right before
I
training. But anyways, go on.
I believe that Ben Hladic is going to be traded from the BC Lions. This
Ah,
is this is I'm going to be a hot take here, I think.
that's pretty
I
hot.
think I think because we are in a new regime, kind of similar to the offensive line a little bit, kind of similar to the receiver a little bit. Ryan Rigmain, although he was a part of it, doesn't have really much what's the word? I guess like
Connection.
Ben Hladic necessarily isn't his guy, right? Micah Alway would be more so his guy because he's brought him in free agency. Adam Konar would be his guy. Josh Woods, I think they're happy with Josh Woods, and I think um, there's another level to Josh Woods. I think there's some hesitation to wanting to start a Canadian linebacker now. Buck Pierce was very um, complimentary at the Lions being able to start 10 Canadians last year, but also said that they're going to look into maybe starting more Americans because of their flexibility with guys like Nathan Rourke, having two Canadians on the defensive line that already are Canadian, as well as offensive line and in the receiving position. So they kind of already set it Canadians on their team. Now, my kind of reasoning, because I'm a big Ben Laddick fan, I would love to see Ben Laddick still on this team. My kind of reasoning for this is why the addition of Micah Alway just doesn't make sense to me, because there's no pathway to him being on the field right now. And I don't get, for a guy like Micah Alway, at his age, you're probably wanting to try to, go win a Grey Cup or try to just be on a winning team. And at the very least, if you're not on a winning team, you're going to want to play. And there wasn't I don't think, a direct path to that, unless maybe Ryan Rigmain was like, hey, we're going to try to make some moves and you're going to be starting come June. And obviously, we saw last year with the additions of a guy like Christian Covington late in the year. And we see the shaking and moving by CFL GMs and front offices. I'm going to say, Blake, that Ben Laddick is going to be a draft day trade for the BC Lions, and they're going to pick up some sort of, whether it's a pick or some sort of other player. I think they move on from Ben Laddick, unfortunately, from my opinion, and I think they end up slotting Josh Woods over to play that will linebacker position, and Micah Alway ends up being that middle linebacker to start for the BC Lions. That is just my gut feeling. I would love to see Ben Laddick still here. He is a guy that I think is still trending upwards. He is a guy that got hurt last year, and kind of his season was a disappointment, right? Rightfully so. But if I remind folks, he had 100 and something freaking tackles the year before. Like, he led the CFL in tackles the year before. He has an injured 2024 season, and everyone's like, man, just he's forgotten about almost. So it is a bummer to think about, and it was one that if I was in charge, if I'm in the GM seat, if Cole's the GM for the day, one I'm not doing. It would be a guy. It would be, if Cole's in the GM situation, I'm probably not signing a guy like Micah Alway on the first day of free agency, because I just don't see the pathway to him playing on the field. They are also high on a guy, Mike Smith Jr., first-time CFL player. I believe it was, I want to say JC Abbott mentioned him, that he's heard rumblings that the BC Lions are high on him. As I mentioned, Blake, the last time JC heard rumblings of David Mackey potentially retiring, he ended up retiring. So I'm gonna go on a limb here and kind of trust JC's intel and his sources inside that building. He mentioned that Mike Smith is a guy that they're very high on and could be a guy that they look to try to get him in the lineup sooner rather than later. So I'm curious, Blake, when looking at the linebacker position, as of now, Ben Laddick, Josh Woods, Patrice Rene slotted to start at linebacker. What are your kind of what are your kind of maybe questions and concerns at that linebacker position? Because maybe a guy like Mike Alway could make Ben Laddick expendable, and we lose out on a guy like Ben Laddick because they want to get Mike Alway on the field.
Yeah, no, that's definitely something that I didn't even think about. The fact that Josh Woods tore his ACL last season, was out for the rest of the regular season. He will probably be back, or not probably, he will be back for the start of training camp this season. And as you said, Cole, like, unless Micah always wants to change positions, but even if that is the case, like, where's he gonna go? Like, you have Jalen Edwards Cooper, who's gonna start at cornerback. You have Patrice Rene, who's gonna start at the Sam linebacker, most likely, and then you have Ben Laddick and Gary Peters as well. So really, right now, the more and more I look at it, and the more and more that I listen to you talk, you are correct that there's nowhere really for Micah Alway to go. He's obviously not going to go even further into the defensive backfield and play like halfback or safety or anything like that. So unless he knew when he signed that he was going to be used as more of a what do you want
Like
to call
a
it?
a package type player, like where he comes on a certain time of the game.
Yeah, like a package or a mentor for the younger players. Unless Micah Alway knew that before he signed, I don't see any reason why he would have signed with the BC Lions. So that'll definitely be interesting to see. Now, I don't believe, I could be wrong on this, but are the Lions without a first round pick this year as well?
Yes, they are. So that's why I think that trading a guy like Ben Haladic probably, I don't know if it commands you a first round pick. Like we didn't even get a first round pick for VA. So like probably unlikely, but like that's where I was like, could you get like a friggin' third round pick, a fourth round pick? Maybe. Obviously you're throwing darts at the dartboard. So it's not a guarantee, and you're moving on from a guy like Ben Haladic, who is a starting caliber player in the CFL. So that's why like this is a very concerning thing for me because the Micah Always signing is a weird one because unless, like you said, his he was told that it's more of a depth role, going to mentor some of the younger guys. I remind folks that he played. I don't know if he played all 18, but he started for the Calgary Stampeders last year and was not a guy that was, excuse me, a depth option or a role player. So this would be something new to him in this position. Um, I just don't see where the path is to him on the field. Could he play Sam? Yes, he could, but I remind folks again that is a coverage kind of linebacking position. Mike always never played that, I don't think, in his career. He's always played the Will, he's always played the Mike linebacker position. So it'd be a new position, him going there. Uh, it's just going to be an interesting one to see because my thought now, Blake, kind of just honestly coming to my head. You mentioned Josh Woods and being healthy. Do they know something that we don't know?
Yeah, maybe.
Obviously, they have the medical history and they're going to be able to see the recovery timeline and stuff like that from their doctors. And is that a thing potentially in the building right now? And something that honestly I didn't think about until right now is that maybe they aren't as confident in Josh Woods being able to return to start the season. And that would be something that is definitely a shitty deal. But I think there's going to be some shaking and moving within that linebacker position because there's too many mouths to feed and only two positions really open right now. So it's going to be curious to see what happens at linebacker. But a guy like Ben Haladic, I remind folks, he had 100 and plus something tackles 2 seasons ago. He can still get to that level. He's a Canadian ratio breaking player for you at linebacker, and I would just hate to lose him for a guy like Micah Alway that maybe has a good season, maybe even a good season or two. I think Ben Halada can have a good season, or excuse me, have a good 3 or 4 or 5 seasons where we're losing a guy to have a better right now, which I understand. They want to, capitalize on this window, and I get that. But Ben Halada can be a good player for us, and I would hate to see it happen, but I just see him as kind of more so the likely candidate to get traded more so than Josh Woods. But maybe I'm thinking right now, maybe Josh Woods isn't healthy, and maybe that's the situation right there. So like, let's get into the secondary and then wrap this up, buddy. We look at the secondary, and pretty much right now, there's one position, as I mentioned, that's open, and I think it's not really that open as well. So let's look at the 5 starters that we're going to see, and that's Gary Peters right back at his position, boundary cornerback position. Telling you guys right now, there's not been a fall off from Gary Peters. Opposing quarterbacks just do not throw at the guy because he locks down your favorite receiver, and I hate to tell you that. So Gary Peters is as elite as it gets in the CFL. I don't care who says different. Um, Turn on a BC Lions game, he doesn't get targeted, and when he does, he breaks up passes. And God forbid he gets a pass given up on. It happens. So Gary Peters, I'm very confident that he's going to have another good season. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe this is kind of one that you hear kind of wanting to be 1 year too early rather than 1 year too late. Gary Peters is getting up there, but I'm kind of confident that he's going to be able to continue to play at a high level for a few more years to come. I would say his kind of fall off is maybe another 2 or 3 years kind of thing. I'm very confident Gary Peters is going to be a good player for us next season. I'm going to skip over that boundary halfback position as of now. We're going to go to safety, Blake. Christophe Boyu, you and I were very high on him last year. We were able to see him in person at training camp. I think there's going to be a next step for him next year going into his second season. And I think, I don't want to speak for you, but I'm very high on him. I think hopefully he can be a very good starting player for us. And you look at backing him up, a Canadian, Charlie Ringland. We kind of seen him last year, University of Saskatchewan product, a depth player, but he's obviously a depth player that's trusted upon in this organization because he's getting the looks to dress on game days and still stick around. I believe he's been within the organization past his 2-year rookie contract. So a player that the organization likes. You look at the field halfback position, Blake, and I would imagine Ronald Kent Jr. will be given every opportunity to start at the boundary halfback position once again. We saw him last year. Had some ups, Blake, had some downs, but I would say that he is a fan favorite, number one, as well as a guy that is very easy to root for with a personality. A guy that we saw in the Arrow Up features and stuff like that, being a very character person. I would imagine be a good guy for the locker room and kind of the energy and kind of the feel within the locker room. I would imagine he's one of those guys that we're going to hear from. And then you look at the cornerback position, very good depth at that cornerback position right now. Blake, you look at a guy like Jalen Edwards Cooper, started for us last year and excuse me, started for us 2 seasons ago. Went to Saskatchewan, failed the physical, kind of was out there as a free agent for most of the season, and then Jordan Perryman, probably going to be our backup as of now at that field cornerback position, but a guy that played meaningful snaps for us for a good majority of last season. Blake, the position that I did gloss over that is still open is the boundary halfback position, as you can see right there with Jalen Williams on the same side of the field as Gary Peters. And that has always been TJ Lee's spot for the last decade until he obviously made the transition to Sam a little bit late last season. That has been Gary Peters, TJ Lee, like I said, the last decade. Um, it is going to be an interesting one, Blake. Now, what I will say, I've heard multiple times that the BC Lions are very high on this Jalen Williams, Blake. He is a former University of Indiana Hoosiers product. He spent some time in the NFL, spent some time in the NFL being a contributor as well. He had, I believe, 2 or 3 interceptions throughout his career, and just unfortunately was kind of one of those roster bubble guys. You hear about it all the time with the bottom 10 guys in the NFL are kind of no different than some of these guys that are in the CFL. And I think the Lions are very high on him, and I would be kind of surprised at maybe some of these names that we don't know as of now. Like I said, some of these Wyower, Neal, and this other backup halfback, and Tyler Cool, guys that I don't have any familiarity with what they're going to play up here in Canada because they've never played in Canada. They never played the CFL game. So they could very well be a halfback, and I could be putting them in the wrong position as of now. Just without any kind of experience or reference to go off of, I kind of placed them there as well as Blake. You can kind of see I ran out of room to go any more past two halfbacks. So we went with 2 halfbacks as of now, and I think the only position in the secondary that's open is that boundary halfback. But I would think Jalen Williams is going to get every opportunity to start at that position. So Blake, I'm looking at the secondary, buddy. What are your kind of questions or maybe concerns when we basically have 4 of the 5 guys that are ready to go and maybe just a boundary halfback to be decided?
Yeah, I think really only question that I have is that boundary halfback. Christophe Beaulieu performed very admirably last year, as I trip on my words. But he performed very well last year, as did Ronald Kent. Like, let's not forget that Ronald Kent is the one that made Jalen Edwards Cooper or expendable, because I believe he was in BC Lions training camp and they were kind of fighting for that position. And then Kent beat him out and JEC was cut.
Marcus Sales.
Sorry, Marcus Sales, you're right. So it wasn't JEC, but it was Marcus Sales who
You're
Ronald
right, though.
was fighting with. And then he won the position, made him expendable. And Marcus Sales went to Saskatchewan.
CFL
So
All Star.
yeah, he was. So he kind of threw it in the Lions' face that he was take cut from the team. But Ronald Kent, I'm not surprised. I would expect him to have just as good a season, if not better, as he had last year. So it's really that boundary half between Jalen Williams and Anthony Witherstone, or maybe the Lions bring in someone else, like maybe someone that they draft in the Canadian draft. They try and see if those can fill that boundary halfback position when the season starts.
Yeah, for sure. So, Blake, that is going to do it for almost a show. We got one more thing to quickly discuss, and then we'll get out of here, Blake. But hopefully, everyone that is tuning in, if you guys enjoyed our little projected depth chart deep dive, let me know down below in the comments. Blake, we're going to post this on our Twitter page, so all the BC Lions fans can kind of get a quick peek at it. I'm definitely prepared to get some comments, especially from probably Roar Report and some other guys that are, this is not look how it's going to be. And yes, I am well aware that this is not how it's going to be. But having not really much references outside of the guys that played for the BC Lions last year, it is hard to kind of slot these guys into where they're going to play. So as of now, this is what it looks like. Like I said, if you guys want to see this, stay tuned to the CFF Twitter page. You guys can see it right there at _CF Fanatics on Twitter. You guys can find that probably by the time this is posted. Which, Blake, we're gonna post this TBD right now. Actually, we're gonna we're gonna wait. We're not gonna put anything cement in stone just yet. But Blake, quickly before we get out of here, that brings us to the combine/draft that is upcoming, Blake, and we're actually gonna have we're gonna we're gonna decide actually, Blake, and I'm gonna probably have that conversation with you. And actually, we'd love to have actually your guys' input. Comment down below if you guys would rather have us be joined by Ryan Rigmaiden, current GM of the BC Lions, or current assistant GM football operations Neil McAvoy on before the CFL draft, and then vice versa. We're going to have the opposite one. So we have Neil McAvoy on before the draft. We're going to have Ryan Rigmaiden on before the season kicks off. So let us know who you guys would like to hear from first. I would kind of preference this with saying that Neil McAvoy is probably going to be the one that is not, I don't want to say overseeing the Canadian football draft, but I remind folks that Ron Rigmain doesn't currently live in the United States, or excuse me, doesn't live in Canada. He lives in the United States. He's based out of, I want to say, Washington, I believe. So he is close, but he is, as he said, he cuts his teeth with his scouting. So he's going to all these camps and stuff like that, seeing all these guys from around the American circuit, where he's relying upon for the, team effort that comes with the regime is Neil McAvoy has been the Canadian kind of director of scouting for as long as he's been a part of the BC Lions, and he kind of controls a lot of that happening. And then I forget, like I said, the name of the other fellow that is by title the director of Canadian scouting. I would imagine they're going to have more so of the scouting kind of side of things, and then maybe Ryan Rigmain will kind of give his opinion there, and they'll kind of collaborate together. So, like I said, let us know who you guys would like to see. Now there's going to be our next guest, and Blake, that's kind of, I guess, kind of be our reminder here. This is going to be Blake and I's first off-season update, and we're going to do 4 of those. So we're going to do off-season update number 1. That is before the, let's say, the free agency update. And then we're going to do a post-combine. So that's when we're going to have maybe a guy like Neil McAvoy on. He's going to obviously be live in Regina. We're going to hopefully be able to pick his brain with some of the prospects that he liked, who maybe they're looking at, who they interviewed, stuff like that. And then we're going to do a update post draft, obviously, and then we'll do number 4, which will be kind of like a training camp one before we kind of that stuff. And then obviously training camp will happen, and we'll be right there, Blake. It'll be almost that time of year again, buddy. So this will be off-season update number 1. We'll do 4 of those before we get to training camp. So stick around for that. We'll probably try to do that like every 2 weeks, every 3-week kind of thing, and we'll go from there. So Blake, lastly, I'm not going to kind of talk too much on this because um, I would like to see what happens at the upcoming national combine. We just saw the invitational combine take place. So, like I said, we're not going to spend too much time on this. I'm just going to give 4 names that I would like people to keep an eye on, because other than that, I don't know too much about this class as of yet. We're going to get our deep dives going here in the next few weeks, having some guests on and crunching the film, I guess, is what we'll say, Blake. So, just a quick conversation about the prospects here, Blake, and I'm going to give you a few names to keep an eye out. We did this last year, folks, and I will remind you guys, I was 2 for 4, 2 for 4. I 2 for 2, 2 for 4 on BC Lions selecting some of these guys. So last year we did Nathaniel Dumoulin-Duguay, we did Christophe Boyu, we did George Una, and we did Tyson Hergott. Tyson Hergott went to the Toronto Argonauts. Nathaniel Dumoulin-Duguay went to the Hamilton Tiger Cats, and then Christophe Boyu, George Una ended up with the BC Lions. So keep an eye on these names, folks. We're going to go with, 1 second, Blake. I'm going to go with Nate Boschman, defensive back, University of Calgary. He's actually a BC boy, and small plug, he is episode 41 guest on the program here. So keep an eye out for that one, folks. Kelowna Owls secondary grad. was the All-Canadian this past season at the University of Calgary and was the number 19 prospect on this winter CFL Scouting Bureau's top 20 list. Another guy I would keep an eye out, Blake, is Jackson Finley, another BC boy, Western University product. He was also on the top 20 CFL Scouting Bureau prospects list. Both safeties, but I would like to know their position flexibility and if they could maybe potentially be uh, useful elsewhere in the secondary as well, potentially maybe a halfback position or something like that as well. So, at the very least, those guys would be very meaningful contributors on special teams and can be guys that could push a guy like Christophe Boyu, not just wanting to give him the starting position, at least wanting to give him some competition. My next guy, Blake, would be Jeremiah Ojo, defensive lineman out of the Montreal, a guy that is an absolute freak. We've heard about him the last 2 years from Montreal. Last year when they won the Vanier was a very highly talked about prospect and a wrecking ball on the defensive line. I would like to see him maybe be targeted by the BC Lions. My last guy, Blake, Ethan Jordan. He was also on the CFL Scouting Bureau's top 20. Receiver out of Wilfrid Laurier, had 1,000+ receiving yards this past season, was like fourth all time in U Sports history, 10+ touchdowns. He had a better season than Kevin Mytel, who was drafted, I think, like seventh or eighth overall 2 years ago, or maybe even last year, I want to say, by the Toronto Argonauts. Contributor, scored a touchdown in the Grey Cup for the Toronto Argonauts last year. But like I said, folks, not too much of a conversation to be had about the upcoming combine. As of now, Blake and I will be back and be joined by one of, like I said, Neil McAvoy, Ryan Rigmain, to discuss what they've seen at both Invitational and the National Combine, and then kind of get a direction of what they want to do going into the combine. So, Blake, I'm not going to ask you about some prospects. I know it's still early in kind of the season, but maybe who are some positions, Blake, that you would like to see the BC Lions go after? And I know we talked about it last year, wanting to see offensive line, and we talked about DB potentially. I'm going to say this, Blake, by preferencing, and obviously you saw that I didn't mention any offensive line. I think this is projected to be a weaker offensive line class than the last few years. So that's kind of why personally I stayed away from it as of now. I'm just unfamiliar with some of the guys up towards the top, and there's just not too many guys up towards the top. And in the top 20 scouting bureau, I think there's only 2 or 3 guys total. So not too sure how many of those guys are going to be left by the second round, pick number technically 9 overall, but first in the second round. I think the Lions could find some value elsewhere with guys like Ethan Jordan. I think will be available, Jeremiah Ojo, stuff like that, and those defensive backs will definitely be available as well. But like, I'm not going to ask you about prospects because obviously there's a lot of just names on the paper here. But who are some positions? Would you kind of select them to maybe go off the line, defensive back, kind of similar to the last few years here?
I think so. I think we just talked about that boundary halfback position, and I think the Lions would be wise to use a pick on one of those, or at least somebody that could play that position. So I would expect, not necessarily offensive line. I think the Lions are pretty set on offensive line, but I would hope they go after defensive back, and I also wouldn't be surprised if they go after a wide receiver. I mean, we talked when we went over the depth chart about the left side of that offense and the left side of the wide receiver room. I wouldn't be surprised if the Lions just use one of their picks and go after a wide receiver. See if one of their young wide receivers wants to step in to that position next season or
Yeah,
this.
well said. It's crazy. It is this season, buddy. There's only a few more months and then it's gonna be I can't wait, man. But Blake, I'm gonna put a nice little bow on today's show. Quick couple reminders, Blake, because we got some news, Blake. We're gonna be airing on Rogers TV starting in a few weeks. Not too sure how it's gonna work with all of our content, but I'm pretty sure we're gonna be able to get all of our content up on Rogers TV. I actually had a call with Todd Jones. He's the producer of the Nanaimo studio over here. I'm actually gonna go check out their studio on Monday, I think,
Very
and
nice.
they offered to allow us to, well, I guess me, unless you want to come over to Nanaimo every time, but they offered us to work with them and to air our content, and we would be allowed to go into their studio, use their production studio, which has cameras, microphones, and have a crew be able to film and stuff like that. And obviously, I would be able to set up our StreamYard there, so I would be able to have you on, and would be kind of like a Donnie and Dolly type thing. Like I'd be able to kind of have a set and then have you page in. So very, very excited about that. It is an exciting time here on the channel, folks. We have a lot going on, and obviously in the last few weeks, if you guys have been paying attention to our podcast that have been coming out, we've had some sponsors that have been reaching out. We've been sponsored by and partnering with Area 51 Sports. Unfortunately for them, I don't know how my ad read right now out, and they also are not sponsoring our BC Lions segment. We also have been sponsored by the Team Canada Senior Men's National Team, and that is what's going to bring me to kind of transitioning into this, Blake. We are currently looking for sponsors. We are looking for one, maybe two, to sponsor Blake and I throughout the year. Actually, let's go with two. We are looking for two sponsors for Blake and I here on the show. We are looking for one sponsor for the post-game show. We are looking for one sponsor on the preview show. And how that's going to work is we will get your logo up on that right top-hand corner just above me, and we'll put it there for every show that Blake and I do, as well as I will start with doing the ad reads, but I'm going to get Blake to do some ad reads by mid-season. Blake, it's funny because I was telling people when I first did them, I hated reading in front of the class, but how like kind of different things are now, where I'm a little bit more comfortable with it. It still is a little bit weird, kind of talking like that, but I will handle the first little bit of ad reads, and then maybe by mid-season, I'm going to pressure Blake into to do an ad read or two. But like I said, we're looking for companies in probably more fitting the BC area. So potentially like a Pastime Sports, a Caged Athletics, some companies that Blake and I have been just reaching out to, very early talks to as of now. Haven't reached out to Caged quite yet. I know you were wanting to do that with Pastime, and hopefully just reach out to some companies. Like I said, put your logo in the top right hand corner there, and then do a 30-second ad read every time we do a show. So let us know if that would be interesting for you and your company. Like I said, we have Area 51 Sports, all your football equipment needs, and then the Senior Men's Team Canada national team is partnering with us as well. Some other news, Blake. Like I said, we are going to be on Rogers TV, which is exciting. Be a friend, tell a friend, everybody. You guys will be able to turn on the TV and maybe see Blake and I's face throughout the regular season, which will be pretty cool. We have also just partnered with millions.com. It is I don't know actually how to kind of word this, Blake. I just got out of this conversation yesterday, off this phone call yesterday. It is it's like a YouTube, I guess, or it's like a Google in a sense, where you can kind of find all of our shows. It's kind of like similar to a website, I guess. It's kind of like just another place for you to find our content. And it's called millions.com. It's a big Bruce Buffer is one of the what's that, like he backs the company. He's one of the guys behind the scenes. Yeah. So they do a lot of USA content, and we're kind of some of the first Canadian content. And actually, one of the guys that reached out, he is a University of McMaster alum, and he's a football player there. And he kind of follows our page, and was like, "Man, like I like your stuff. Would you be interested in kind of doing something like this?" And they reached out. We had a conversation, and actually, some of our episodes are already up there already. Our BC Lions free agency discussion is already up there, and they are actually going to Blake make us some merch and make us some clips and stuff like that. And like as a huge opportunity for us, I would recommend going and check out millions.com right now. I believe you can just go to their search bar, type in Canadian Football Fanatics, or type in any guests that we've had. Type in BC Lions, it might come up. Type in Taylor Algersma, or whoever it might be that you want to see, Javon Katoy, and the episode will come up. Basically, when you go there, you can kind of see our it'll be like a website. Like you go there, it'll be Canadian Football Fanatics. It'll be like episodes. It'll be like merch, and then it'll be like something else. And like I said, you guys can go there. I believe once I figure it out, we will be able to stream off there. So like how we can stream off here and onto Twitter and onto YouTube, we'll be also to stream off Millions. So you guys can find us and our content on there as well. And then like I said, like they're gonna make us merch, which is freaking hella cool. And make us like the clips that I've been doing. I was kind of joking with them, like people see these little 30-second clips that I've been putting out and think that like it's a snap of a finger, when it takes probably on average, like maybe 2.5, 3 hours kind of to do each one of these. They're going to be producing some of these clips for us, so that when we do shows like this, I don't have to go back and edit some of these clips. There's just going to be 7 or 8 clips that pop up in kind of our feed once I log into the profile, and we can share them onto our Instagram, share them onto our Twitter. So a lot of good things have been happening for us in the last few weeks, and I think that kind of starts with marketing ourselves, Blake, which we've been doing a really good job with, kind of putting out some of these clips with the kind of what we started with our I think our off-season updates with some of the teams we put together with clips with Mark Steven and DB Darren Baum and Cliffy and Elksford. Um, we put together those clips, and I could kind of see like our growth with people starting to follow us and our numbers. Like I said, like I sent that thing on Twitter. We are up over 100K views in the last 30 days, which is incredible when you think of like that's 1/10 of a million people that are watching our stuff, which is really cool to think. And honestly, buddy, I know you and I both agree, and this is kind of getting a little bit long winded, but this is we've said it time and time again, but this is only the beginning for Blake and I, especially with our BC Lions content. Blake and I are going to be here for you guys all the step of the way throughout this regular season that's coming up, and the post game shows, the preview shows, whenever there's kind of some breaking news. Blake and I are trying to get on here, and our coverage and content is only going to go to the next level in the next year and a half. And I know Blake shares that passion with me as well, and um, just an exciting time, Blake. Like I've been saying, man. And, looking for sponsors, but Blake, to kind of get back to you, buddy. I know I've been talking a little bit while. It's exciting times, man. We're gonna be on Rogers TV and YouTube and stuff like that. It's gonna be really cool, man. I'm really excited. How you feeling?
Yeah, that's amazing news. Like that's it's a little scary to be completely honest.
It
Like
is.
I know our buddies over at the Piffles podcast. They also I believe it's SaskTel Max where they get re-aired, if you will. But yeah, no, it's definitely maybe I'll have to shave, put on nicer clothes when we're recording, stuff like that. But it's definitely exciting news, and I think it goes to show how much hard work that more so you, like I will fully admit, especially like days like today, you do a lot of the hard work with the prep for the show and stuff, and I just kind of show up. But yeah, it definitely shows the hard work that you and I and mainly you have done throughout this kind of 17, 18 months. It's getting close to a year and a half, 2 years, which is hard to believe that you
It
and I have done this together. But it's definitely shows that we're putting in the effort. And to the fans, thank you. Because without you guys, none of this effort would mean anything. Like we could put in all this effort, but without the constant support, we would just be two guys talking Lions and talking CFL. Like we wouldn't be going anywhere. So thank you to the fans for all your support.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Blake. That is 100% bang on, dude. Is we couldn't do it without the support, and I'm sure that we do this a lot. Or you're actually better at remembering than I am, but thank you to obviously our significant others and
Yeah.
the sacrifice that they give up with obviously sending not getting to spend time with us, I guess, and that sort of stuff. So just thank you to everybody that supported Blake and I, and obviously, buddy, handling that shit is or that's something actually I got to watch. Is we're not supposed to swear now, but handling that stuff outside of the podcast, buddy, I couldn't do it without you supporting me, right? And obviously, like you said, it would be two guys just talking into a microphone. If it wasn't for you, it'd only be one guy talking into a microphone. So, both grateful for each other, both grateful for the Canadian Football Fanatics and everything that they've given us, man. Because 2 years ago, I was getting back into CFL, kind of wanting to be where maybe not where we are now, but like have this vision of like kind of what we've started here. Like obviously with us, right? Like with me, you have a big tie to the CFL family, CFL community, right? With where you have a lot of CFL friends and family, where I have a lot of friends and family, right? But they're not CFL fans and stuff like that. And that's been a big part of me trying to brainwash them, if you want to call it that, of like we have a phenomenal product here, and please do not just it's not the NFL, so I'm not going to watch. And why I've also kind of dove into U Sports and CJFL, right? Is like on Saturdays, you always hear about like people, oh, TSN has the Division One games. It's like we have U Sports here in Canada, and guys are going to the NFL. Theo Benedette, Gio Manu, Taylor Elgersma, multiple other guys that are getting NFL shots that we have good football up here to support on our own. Now, am I saying that you can't be an NFL fan, Blake? Of course I'm not, because as you know, buddy, there's not many. I am as big as an NFL fan as there is. I love the NFL, but I have so much pride with our support, our sport, and what we've been able to create here, buddy. And like I said, we are only getting better here. Like I know we're nervous to be air it on TV, but hopefully with reps and more time, we'll be pros at it and be the, you'll be my Rick Dollywell and I'll be your Don Taylor one day, maybe, buddy. But I think that'll kind of put a nice bow on the episode. Like some new things since we recorded last. How do you like the background? We're gonna kind of tweak it and work with it a little bit. But you like the background and some of the other stuff we've been kind of working around?
Yeah, the background looks great. We don't have to remind people where to find us anymore. That X in the Instagram is there in the bottom left corner, just below me. And then the depth chart, man, you put a lot of effort into that. I can definitely tell that. So those looked amazing. Kind of the split screen looked really, really good, as you can see now. So I'm excited to see all the new stuff that we can continue to do this season.
Yes, sir. And Blake, I don't think you've seen this quick little teaser if anybody hasn't, but this is the podcast episode as well, and a cool little kind of, I don't know why it took us so long, to be honest, because it was um accessible. I kind of just didn't think I was able to do it, but I figured it out pretty quickly and was able to. Unfortunately, Blake, last little tangent I go on. I probably honestly throw more of these things out than I do like that I'm happy with because I'm always like, oh, it doesn't look good, so I always end up making a new one. And I make a new one. I'm like, man, this is saving me too long. But Blake, that is going to do it for our BC Lions off-season update numero uno. Blake, let the people know where they can find you on social media as well as maybe what you got going on. But I know you said it's hockey season, lacrosse season for you right now.
Yeah, it's lacrosse season is around the corner, which is kind of crazy. But on my Twitter, you can find me at Blake3653, which I know Cole hates to say. My Instagram is at b.milton97. And if anyone wants to find me on Facebook, it's just at Blake Milton. As far as hockey, unfortunately, I hope the people couldn't notice too much, but I did have a game going on in the background here. My team unfortunately got eliminated. So one of them is eliminated. But I do have a game later on today. And then we are hosting the TELUS Cup, which is the National U18 Championships. That'll be going on at the end of April out in Chilliwack. So I will be quite busy with that for the week of that. That's April 21st to the 27th at the Chilliwack Coliseum. And then, as you said, it feels like now that we're into March, lacrosse and ball hockey and all my refereeing and all that is going to start up here before I can blink. So the off season, I really never have an off season. I know that you do a little bit more than me, but for me personally, like I never really have an off season. I get maybe 2 months, probably about August and right now the beginning of March. So I'm slowly getting into my second month of the off season, but I'm not there yet.
Yeah, buddy, take advantage, man, because we remember the I want to say the burnt outness, but the stamina that comes with keeping up throughout a CFL season. We saw that well, I think it was our first full season of us doing it. I know we kind of dabbled in 2023, but first full season, man, that is a long 18-week, 21 weeks, I guess, with bye weeks, and then into the playoffs. We're hoping for a Grey Cup and to be raising that in Winnipeg next season. So, lastly, Blake, before we get out of here, we're going to save talking about our hockey team for off the air. Um, Please be sure to comment down below whether you guys want to ask a question to Blake and I. Comment down below whether you guys want a different guy in our boundary receiver depth chart or whatever it may be. Feel free to comment down below. I love the interacting conversations. We actually had a good comment the other day in one of our podcast episodes, and one I'm going to actually use in future ones. So please comment down below. We'd love to hear from you guys, and of course, subscribe. Smash the subscribe button for us. I will repeat once again, all of our numbers are looking great and some of our viewership, but it is still at 75% of the people that view our content are unsubscribed. So please subscribe to the channel, guys. It would be greatly appreciated, and it is free. It is not hard to do. And we will see you guys on the next BC Lions offseason update.